Okay, so right now we're going to keep going about Madeleine McCann. This is a case that began in 2007 with the disappearance of 3-year-old Madeleine McCann on May 3rd of that year. Now, I did one segment earlier that was kind of like our introduction, and I'm going through the stuff, and it's like, I like to put things out, as I kind of make new developments in not only the research, but also in what you're thinking. And today I would really like to discuss the Sky News documentary that was done about the case of Madeleine McCann. It is something that is not super viral on the internet. It only has about 500,000 views, more or less. Once again, just to reiterate, I followed this case closely a couple years ago, and I've been kind of going through some of the older cases that I used to cover in the past, like before I was ever doing anything like a podcast. So it was really nice to get up to date on all of the facts. And to be honest, like, I thought I was going to be pulling up the Wikipedia page, and I thought by now in 2018 I was expecting to find something like this case had been solved, because I do believe that this is a case where we can actually obtain a definitive conclusion as to what happened. I don't necessarily think that we could find the remains of Madeleine McCann. I do personally believe she's passed away, but we might be able to find out who is personally involved with the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, and as I mentioned in the first segment, what I believe to be a murder. Now, let's talk about what could have happened. And I mean this in the most theoretical sense, because I was watching the Sky News documentary about this case, and they had an investigator named Mark Rowley on there. And what he suggested was, do not try to put your mind into the mind of the killer or the mind of the perpetrator, the mind of a criminal. Once you start expecting a criminal to think like you, it doesn't exactly work, and you can often make very critical errors. And I was like, well, I just did a segment, on Madeleine McCann where I'm kind of put forward a theory that I genuinely believed that her parents had given her drugs, so she would have been, sleep induced, sedatives, something that would have knocked her out so that they could have gone to their group, the top of seven, and they could have been out having their little evening gatherings. I mean, I put out that theory, but what if Detective Rowley is right? And I'm just trying to think of this as like, what normal people do. What he's sort of saying is, do not expect these things to just be normal and even simple. You're dealing with the mind of someone who could be very deranged. I mean, you're dealing with someone who is not thinking in a normal way. So let's always bear that in mind. And that's why I wanted to kind of come at things from a different angle. And let's talk about the possibilities that could have happened to Madeleine McCann, because it's not only abduction, it's not only murder or manslaughter. There's even the possibility that Madeleine just woke up in the middle of the night, walked out of the door, which she would have been left unsupervised, and just wandered into either like a storm drain, or it was some sort of pit that they were doing some construction on, and then it was filled in. Might have been even the next day or something, or it was filled in recently after Madeleine disappeared, and they think that that's one of the reasons that Madeleine might not have ever been found, is just that she got buried into a construction site. Okay, but how does that explain the cadaver dogs finding the scent of a corpse in apartment 5A? I don't know, but that's just something that they discussed on Sky News. Now let's talk about what could have happened. Madeleine and her family were staying in apartment 5A at a resort in Portugal. One of the things I would correct myself with is that in the first one, I said that the parents chose not to use anything from like the creche, the daycare service. I said that that was only going through the day, so they must have only been putting their kids to bed at night. It turns out that this creche, like like a daycare service, they actually did have a full nighttime care service. They called it the night creche, and I guess that's sort of like daycare slash nanny services. I mean, not really popular here in America using that word anyway. But what I would say about that is the parents could have sent their kids to the night creche, but they did not. And I also was like, it's very unlikely that someone was actually coming in to check on Madeleine every 30 minutes, like the parents said. But what they actually said in the Sky News documentary was that someone from the group of seven adults at the tapas bar was going to check on their kids every 30 minutes. So it's very likely Madeline was only probably checked on once during the night. I mean, if they said you have seven people and every 30 minutes somebody is going to check on their kids, they probably only looked at Madeline once. And, well, my original theory was that she had been given some sort of sleep-induced drugging that would have led to her death, and then the parents concocted a plan or a scheme or something to cover it up. But we also have something like Kate McCann, Madeline's mom, was saying that there was a window that was open in Madeline's bedroom that had previously been closed. And I was like, I get so suspicious when I hear things like that. I mean, maybe if they had some smashed glass that had fallen into the apartment or something, definitively say that that was a break in. Because there's this entire alternative theory that Madeline just woke up during a burglary and then the burglar panicked and did something to her, abducted her, murdered her. I mean, like, even if you want to explain the sort of corpse dog catching a hold of something on the behind the sofa in apartment 5A, what they could do to account for that is Madeline woke up and there was a burglar in the apartment. Now, what I would say about that is, where is the physical evidence? Where is the definitive physical evidence that there was a burglar who murdered Madeline in the apartment? Are we talking about things like major blood spatter? I mean, are we talking about things like, scuff marks and boot prints and anything of that nature that we see with these other true crime scene cases? I'm not seeing the enormous amount of physical evidence that suggests that there was ever a burglar in the apartment. I mean, I think if, the burglar got scared and murdered Madeline, there would be more definitive physical evidence. There would be more, well, more blood, first of all. And if you just want to look at the possibility of Madeline being abducted without, being abducted for interrupting a burglary, I don't think that that's super plausible. What I think is more plausible is that the parents did something to cause her death and then covered it up. I would say, though, when I look at the interviews with Jerry and Kate McCann, I don't really get the overwhelming suspicion that these people are cold-blooded killers or that these people are liars. I mean, like, they don't come across as, disingenuous. But once again, as Detective Rowley said, you might not be dealing with someone who is thinking normally. And let's really expand upon his point. You might not be dealing with someone who is thinking exactly the way you would think or the way I would think. So, what I would say about this is, let's always bear in mind that there is the possibility that the parents did cover these things up, that there was a horrible accident, or maybe even something that was deliberately done to Madeline and the other two McCann children. Maybe they were given some sort of drug to put them to sleep, and that knocked her Madeline out, and she just didn't wake up. So the parents panicked, and they had to find a way to dispose of the body, and they concocted the abduction story so they wouldn't get caught for the murder. At the time of the Sky News documentary, they were still focusing in on the person known as the Tanner Man, who was witnessed by a friend of the McCanns named Jill Tanner. I hope I got her first name right. Of course, her last name is Tanner, the namesake for Tanner Man, because she saw a man 45 minutes before Madeline's disappearance carrying a girl away from the resort. Someone has come forward and said that he was that man and he provided the clothes he was wearing and his daughter's clothes, and that completely cleared that up. But there was also even another person who was attending the night crash, who said that he picked up his daughter from the night crash and was just like, that was also me. That also could have been me very easily. I mean, we have families at this resort. This is a resort. This is an apartment thing. I would say, though, that when I was watching the Sky News documentary and I was listening to people talk about the potential suspects, there was a Portuguese individual, there was an African individual, and there was a Russian individual. They all had these kind of, suspects. None of them felt very strong. It's like the guy from Russia, his name escapes me, I can't remember his name, but they even questioned him, and he was just like, he was cooperating fully. He was like, I mean, I was there and I did witness Madeline from time to time, but he was fully willing to cooperate as a witness. And one of the the African gentleman, has passed away in a tractor accident, and the third person just sort of seemed like he was dodging the cameras. He didn't want to be photographed. I believe he's from Portugal, but once again, they don't really have any hard evidence to tie any of these people to abducting Madeleine. Can you prove that they were in the apartment? Did they leave something behind? Do they have any DNA? Do they have any fingerprints? Do they have any fibers? Do they have anything at all that would suggest that there was this other person in the apartment that could have abducted Madeleine, other than the parents? And it's like, it really is something that is kind of just like a thorn in my side, though, when I'm thinking about the parents, Jerry and Kate McCann. They don't come across as someone who's like, really suspicious. They really sound like, they're telling the truth, but we're not looking at their personalities and the tears and the emotions. When we're looking at their sort of, well, if we're looking at the timelines and the evidence, I think it would make a little bit more sense that they were actually involved with this. They also made the possibility. Let's look at the possibility of, was Madeleine McCann murdered, or is she still alive? I mean, there are things like, sex rings that do exist. People get pulled into modern day slavery. That stuff does exist. And a lot of people have, kind of entertained this possibility that there's no definitive proof that Madeleine is deceased. And even if I were to tell you that the parents did it, that they drugged her and she had a bad reaction and she died, where's the body? I would not be able to tell you that to save my life. I mean, like, I can't even theorize in a way, other, I can't even theorize in that particular way. So then people interpret that to be Madeleine's remains have never been found. Therefore, it's possible that she is still alive and that she, survived and she got pulled into something, perhaps, like an, a, an abduction tied to a child's sex ring or something like that. I think that that's very, very theoretical. That is something that is it's based mostly on like a hypothesis as opposed to the hard definitive physical evidence. The historian Patricia Crone once said the famous statement, "Never substitute torturous reasoning for hard evidence." And what I'm just asking is, did anyone prove that there was a break-in to the McCann's apartment? I mean, I don't even know if this saying that about is genuine. I mean, to me, it sounds kind of like silly and suspicious. And to give you the flat out honest things, because I don't really hold back what I honestly believe on this channel, I believe that they kind of fabricated that story. Then, like, Kate probably opened the window to just sort of provide, just a little bit more detail to the story about what would have happened to Madeleine. And well, what I would also say is just that, where is the definitive physical evidence that there was a burglary, a break-in? I mean, there's some talk about there were some fingerprints that were found on the outside of the window, but like, what is that? What's going on with that? I mean, like, when were those taken? What happened with that? Bear in mind, it's like two families stayed in this apartment 5A after the McCanns had left. I mean, the 48 hours after the disappearance of Madeleine, the McCanns went back to the United Kingdom. And during the time before it was shut down for investigators, shut down by investigators for investigation, I should say, two other families were staying in there, and I don't know when they took the fingerprints, and it's a rental. I mean, you're gonna find prints all up and down. I mean, what we would really want to be talking about are things like DNA, things that could, signs of forced entry. I mean, like, sometimes there are simpler things, and I think a lot of these unsolved mysteries can be attributed to things like murder and accidental death, as gruesome as it sounds. Once they began to talk about the theory that what if Madeleine wandered out of bed in the middle of the night and she fell in a construction pit or something of that nature, I mean, it's like, if they did reveal that that was the truth, I would not be surprised at all. I mean, when I was younger, I was always waking up in the middle of the night and walking around the house and messing around here and there, and I would come down to the basement and watch TV, and I would watch things like Mighty Max and such. But I would say that that's totally normal behavior for children, and it's not a crazy possibility. I would say, though, that I would agree with one thing that was put forward with Sky News when they said that one of the reasons why they believe that this case has gone unsolved for so long is just two different nations. You have the UK police and the Portuguese police trying to cooperate on things. They have to communicate everything on things. And, like some of the people, I mean, are not, well, I would tell you, everyone in Portugal is working in Portuguese first and then English second. So everything has to be translated. It's just been a slow moving process. You have not only two different police departments, you have two different countries, and that's just really slowed down the investigation. What I would really want to look for, and as we're going to keep exploring the Madeleine McCann case, I would really try to find some definitive physical evidence that there was somebody else in the apartment, in apartment 5A, around the time that Madeleine disappeared. Now that we have that kind of breakdown and the clarification about the timeline that only every 30 minutes someone went to check on their own kid, I'd always interpreted that as like thinking that either Jerry or Kate was going back to check on the kids every 30 minutes. But if I understood what Sky News said, it was like every 30 minutes someone from the top of seven would go out and check on their kids. So it's like they probably only saw Madeleine once that their kid. So it's like they probably only saw Madeleine once that night, and they might not have known that anything was wrong. I mean, they really might not have known that there was any problem at all. It's like, I mean, like during the first kind of checkup on her, or I mean, maybe at that time, if indeed that Madeline was given some drugs, it could have been at that moment that they recognized that there was a problem with Madeline, that she wasn't waking up or something of that nature. But we're gonna have to explore a little bit more. Jerry and Kate McCann come across as, I don't get the smallest vibe when I watch their interviews and when I saw some of the segments in this documentary that they are murderous in any way, that they are malicious in any way, that they're the kind of people that would be giving their kids drugs and to knock them out. I don't get that suspicious vibe from them at all. But we gotta remember what Detective Rowley said. It's like we can't just put our minds into somebody else's body and be like, expect that everyone is going to have these sort of same normal ways of thinking. Even if you think that you're the most normal person in the world, which, I mean, I'm sure not, but we can't just expect that, a mentally deranged person who would do something heinous like murdering a child or harming a child or even abduction is going to have the same thought processes as someone who wouldn't. No two people are really going to be alike, we're like snowflakes or something. And I guess I know that's an urban myth, but no two snowflakes are alike. Just an expression. So we're going to have to keep exploring this case a little bit more. The big things that I would say that I've come away with is that they probably did not check on Madeline that frequently, and maybe during the first time, or even if they got to her a second time, they could have recognized that something was wrong. Also, the there really just does not seem to be anyone talking about a large amount of physical evidence in the apartment that would suggest that this was a break-in. I find Kate McCann's story very suspicious, that she found an open window. I find the kind of descriptions of the apartment very suspicious. It really just sort of sounds like the story has been concocted by the McCanns because something happened to Madeline that could have very easily been the cause of their own doing. However, though, like once again, if I were to hear that they discovered that somehow Madeline had wandered away from the apartment and then she got into some terrible accident, I wouldn't think twice about it. I would be like, I would believe it, and I wouldn't be surprised. That's all for me now, and until next time.